is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, brought to you by Anonymous, covering Perks of Being a Wallflower. The film, not the book. So get off my back, okay? I watched the movie. That's what they wanted. That's what they asked for. Everybody just relax.
I will be reading the book, though.
In this episode, Natasha drinks so that she does not feel the things this movie made her feel. And RoShawn is very happy that she felt something.
I am.
Welcome to Spoil Me.
This is my first Spoil Me.
It is.
And I say first, like there's going to be more, but there won't be because this anonymous person found a loophole and exploited the fuck out of it.
Yeah, there's not really technically a way to commission me to record something specifically with RoShawn if you use the website to buy the episode. You can't do that. You can buy a wannabe episode, and you can ask the person who you want me to co-host with if they're available for a date that you pick and work it out with them on their end, which we did do for Veronica Mars with Jamie. Mm-hmm. But this person
was like,
anonymous,
fuck all that shit.
They just sent me 2 cashier's checks and told me, cover this. And that one of the checks had RoShawn's name on it and one had mine on it.
So here I am.
They just completely circumvented the whole system. And I was just like, all right, sir.
Right? Like, you can't even be mad at that hustle. You're like, all right, you got me.
And
okay?
he has since said, I think it's a he, has since said, I'm going to do this again.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And I was like, well.
You send that check, you can do it again. Because it's that time of the year where RoShawn needs extra checks. So
it's true.
I'm just saying. Let me say, I am thrilled, though, and very happy that I happen to be included in this because this is a movie I had wanted to watch. And I realized once I watched it tonight for this that I had started this a couple years ago. But I never
really?
I only made it like the first 10 minutes. It was just happened to be on. I didn't look for it. It was just on. And I was like, oh, I'll watch this. And then life happened, and I never watched the whole thing. I enjoyed it tremendously, and I'm really glad that I got to watch it, and I'm happy we get to talk about it.
I liked it also. I wasn't sure because, a lot of stuff that I have watched about the high school experience does not ring true to what my experience was like. Mm-hmm. And I was a little nervous about this being about high school, and even from the very start, he says something like, high school's so much worse than middle school. And I was like, wrong.
I thought that was a really funny line, too, because the consensus, from what I understand, is everyone agrees middle school is the worst. Mm-hmm. But I related to this movie. It's a funny thing, too, because, this movie is a good mixture of an actual high school experience crossed with a sort of stylized what we like to think our high school experience was. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. You can relate to being sort of an outsider and having deep, what turned out to be seriously deep shit happen to you. And you kind of think that you're going to have this high school experience where you meet these fabulous sort of people that accept you and bring you into their crew or whatever. And that shit doesn't necessarily happen in real life, but it's what we all think it's going to be like, I'll meet my people, and they'll see me and recognize me and accept me. And that doesn't always turn out to be true.
No, and because I started watching this, Owen had to leave for work, but he watched the beginning with me, and he agreed with me because for him, middle school was so much worse.
Right.
I just feel like kids are much more sociopathic in middle school, and by
It's
high
true.
school, they've sort of decided who their tribe is going to be in a lot of ways, and they stick to that and don't bully the same way that they
I
did.
think the cruelty extends to high school, but I think it also is a very, like, the cruelty we see in media for high school is a very specific thing that I don't know translates to real life.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think we as consumers, as people, as Americans, have difficulty expressing and acknowledging how cruel middle school is. So a lot of times we take that and we push it to high school because it feels better when they're 17, because it's hard for us to accept that a 12-year-old can be that cruel. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. No, 100%. Especially because a lot of that cruelty is like weirdly sexual. I think like there's a strangeness to it that's really uncomfortable for adults because they don't think that kids should be going down that road at all at that age, and it's just sorry guys, but that's 100% what happens at that age.
Yeah.
And Krista's saying unless you're the Lotus on the high school poll, which like even then. Like I was friends with some of the people who, and like not close friends, but like acquaintance friends with people who are lowest on the poll, and
wait, that poll, that
like the
weird...
social totem poll, you know?
Yeah, I never had that. Thank God.
And a couple like those folks tended to be less bullied than they were just kind of ignored. Whereas in middle school, like bullying straight up, like I got bullied in middle school as well. So. It's just something that I haven't seen in my experience or the people that I was close to who I would have expected to go through that kind of thing. But what I did relate to a lot in this movie is the fact that everybody that he becomes friends with and who he is accepted by is at least a year ahead of him, if not more.
Yeah.
And that was like, I left my school in my junior year. That was my last year because my senior year, everybody that I was actually friends with had graduated already and I did not want to be there anymore. So I found a private school so that I could leave with them and not have to experience being a senior with my class who were trash.
Right.
So
so middle school is generally like in my experience, 6th to 8th grade, like 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yeah.
Right.
Same.
So I had, I want to say 4 schools for those 3 years.
Yikes.
Yeah, it was.
That's too
terrible.
much.
It's a lot. So I got bullied a lot in middle school, but my bullying it's hard to pinpoint because there was so much happening. Like I was bullied because I was new. I was bullied because, and you guys who listen to the podcast have heard me talk about it like over the years. I moved around a lot as a kid, and I would always move from one extreme to another. So I would leave like a predominantly white school and it end up in the inner city school. And so that I would get bullied because the way I spoke and my experiences didn't mesh with the populace or whatever. Right. And then I would leave from like Philadelphia area schools and end up in rural Georgia, and that was like very strange and odd and off-putting, and so I was like weird because I talked funny and all that kind of shit. But then when I got to high school, it was the only time where I was in one school for the duration. So my middle school is hard for me to pinpoint, like, was the bullying because of what I was or who I was, or was it just because I was new and I wasn't cute and I talked weird and I was from a funny place, you know?
Yeah.
But I also have that thing that I've talked about before in the podcast as well. I, like Charlie, had a tendency to get adopted by people. Okay. And it's such a fucking blessing. But I would end up in a weird situation where other weirdos would be like, oh, she's one of us.
I sense you.
right?
Yeah.
and like our friendship is a reflection of that, and all my other friendships are as well, where someone who is more outgoing, more gregarious, more, whatever, would take me under their wing, and I would get to have the benefit of that person's social circle. I would just get to enjoy that. And you are just one of many like that. Like I just attract people who adopt me and let me kind of ride their coattails. And that's always been the way for me. And it was
for
like
those
that.
who can't see me, I was doing the Jim Halpert stare at the camera moment there.
And that happened for me in high school as well. I got to high school and I was my weird self, and really nobody gave a fuck about me, and I was fine with that. And then someone who was much more popular decided that I was worthwhile and was like, oh, she's with us now. Mm-hmm. And it changed my whole world. It gave me access to people who, if they weren't necessarily air quotes popular, were at least like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the right word. If they weren't popular, they were at least, they had
left
a
alone.
station and left alone, and like had a position that was respected. Like, okay, yeah, you're not like a jock, but you are not someone you fuck with.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like a safe space. So, and that has been like, that has saved my life like dozens of times. Literally. Like well past high school into grown up life. Oh, she's friends with so-and-so, so she's okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying, like, all right, so you know what? We're talking so much about our own experiences, but we're supposed to be talking about this movie. So let's talk about this movie. So, the film is based on a novel by Stephen Chbosky. Mm-hmm. Hoping I'm saying that right. Published in 1999.
So I Googled, like, I was watching the movie and the soundtrack, which was right to my heart. It was like my whole life, you guys, the soundtrack. And so it's set like in the early 90s, which is when I was in high school, in Pittsburgh. And it was just so on the nose. It was so on the fucking nose.
So that was the main disconnect for me.
No.
Yeah. I was not a music kid. I didn't care about it too much. Honestly, the thing for me, and I'm realizing like as I get older what was really going on. I loved hip hop, and my father and mother both looked down on hip hop and were huge dicks whenever it was like even on the radio. So I resisted how much I loved it until like college, late college, because there was like this weird stigma with it. And the music that they all listened to, I mean, my father listened to Spanish music, and my mother listened to like Madonna and Carly Simon and Melissa Etheridge and shit that's not in my fucking like.
Carly
what's
Simon
the word?
Is the shit, though. I'm just gonna put
Carly
that out
Simon
there.
Is fine. She's fine, but it's not something that speaks to me at all.
Right.
And a lot of my friends who were the year above me were very into music, and I only ever went to any concerts because they invited me. And those concerts were for bands that I had never even heard. And I just went because I was like, yeah, they told me to go. All right. So, like, I went to the Bare Naked Ladies, and all my friends were singing along, and I had never heard any of these songs.
They're not a very good band.
They're fine.
They're okay.
I feel about them as I feel about many musical artists, which is sure
they're not great.
But they're all like, it was just so that was the thing, like in this movie, the fact that he knows about music, tries to learn about music, and that's a connecting point for him. That was the disconnecting point for me with a lot of people. Because there was nobody at my school who liked the kind of music that I did, and I didn't even understand what kind of music I liked really until way later in life.
Oh, yeah.
And now I know what I like, and now I'm woke and I hate what I like. And it's terrible. And life isn't fair. So
I watched this movie and, like, at one point Steve came out to make something to eat and I was watching it and he was like, because Charlie's listening to the Smiths. And Steve and I both, it's funny because our life experiences are so different, but they also overlap in weird ways. Mm-hmm. So Steve's in the kitchen and he's like, is that a Smiths song? Steve is a huge Smiths fan. I am as well. And I was like, yeah. He's like, what are you watching? I told him, he was like, I don't know anything about this movie. This is just like for the podcast. And he stood in the living room for a little while and he listened to it. And then he sat down and he ate. And I was like, you know you want to watch this shit, don't you? I was like, this is a sad teen movie from the 90s. There's lots of Smiths happening. All the songs from this movie were all like things that I listened to at the time when I was the age that these kids are supposed to be at this time. Like, this is just 100% like me in a bedroom alone at night listening to weird music, which at the time you would hear this music, you would have to find like a college station, like your local college station. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, oh, this is so fucking what my high school deal was like. This is exactly what it was.
Can I just like register how great it is that we have a black and white host, and the black host is the one who's like, the Smiths, yes, and the white host is like, I listen to hip hop, so sure, I guess if you want to be sad, whatever. I've got my little John over here because he gets me hype. Pass the sapphire.
Oh yeah, but yeah, it was just like watching the movie, listening to the music, and also I'll say I am a sucker, and always have been, for these types of movies. This teen, I don't want to say angst because it feels like judgy, but like this sort of teen, I want to belong, but I don't quite fit. Mm-hmm. You know, like, this shit will get me every time. This type of movie will get me every time. And I don't even know if this was a good movie. You know? Like, objectively speaking, I don't know if it was. But it fucking got all my buttons. It really did. Like, guys, I'm sorry.
Right. So, we have the main character, Charlie. And it starts off with him writing to someone.
Someone, right.
Saying that, I've been told that you listen and don't judge.
Yeah. And
so I'm telling you everything that's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's essentially like journal entries. Mm-hmm. And he is starting high school, and it's his very first day.
Yeah.
And he spent the previous summer in a hospital.
Yeah. There is something that has happened. Mm-hmm. And we don't find out until a little bit later what that was. Right? Yeah. But there's like some kind of big thing.
It's not specifically said that it's like a mental hospital, but you get the impression for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And the idea that he's starting high school is such a big deal that we all understand immediately that there's a reason why it's a big deal, even though we don't know what that is until a little bit later. Which I wasn't 100% in love with that reveal, because it comes at, I want to say, at the party, right?
Which part of the reveal? Because there's a bunch of little
there's a bunch of little ones. But there's a moment where he's talking to the Hermione, Sam.
Indeed.
And he tells her, he's talking about his friend. And she's like, where's your friend now? And he's like, oh, he shot himself.
Right.
And that's when we find out that's what, one of the big things that has happened to our Charlie. Which is why coming to high school is such a big deal, because he's alone now because his best friend is gone. And his best friend is gone because he killed himself.
Right.
Which, considering what we've been through recently, was like a little bit of a kick in the stomach.
Yeah, not a super big fan. What did you mean when you said you didn't care for that reveal? Like the way that he said it, the way the film handled it, that they didn't come back to it, or?
I think what I didn't care for was, and this is probably not a fair critique, but like when he says it, and there's really nothing she can do but say she's sorry, which she does, right?
She doesn't say anything. She doesn't say she's sorry. She just stares at him like she doesn't know what to say. And then he goes, "Is there a bathroom?" And she tells him where the bathroom is and just kind of watches him walk away like,
oh, and then they had the toast later, right? The toast to him. That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's what I didn't like about it, is that she doesn't know what to say. And I feel like it's kind of shitty to hold that against her. Mm-hmm. You know, because she's not prepared for that. But
yeah, I don't know in high school what I would have said if somebody told me that. I think I'd just be like, what? Like, not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. Like, what do you say when you're a teenager when someone tells you something like that? But I don't know. I think I was bothered because it's so, like, raw considering our recent experience. And I think maybe as I was watching it, I was just like, no, I want you to be better. Which is not necessarily fair. But it's what I felt.
But I get it, yeah.
You
know? So, yeah, his first day, like, some girl calls him a faggot for having a trapper keeper?
The girl who's been getting straight A's since, like, elementary school.
I don't know how she does it because he has a trapper key. Like, this has always been something fascinating to me, is the reasons that people get insulted are, like, because obviously people are just going to pick somebody to make fun of, and they need to find something about that person because that's who they're going to make fun of. And it's not about what they're doing. It's about the person. But just sort of weird thing to, like, get fixated on, you know?
And she shows up a couple of different times throughout the movie, and she's always that way. Which I feel like there is, and because he says pointedly that this girl has been getting straight A's since first grade, there is something about people who are book smart or whatever and are still really shitty fucking people. And I kind of really liked that was included, you know?
Yeah, like, she's not like some like meathead jock who just has nothing better to do but pick on some kid.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it being a girl too, I think is more unusual as well.
Agreed. Yeah. She's terrible.
So,
she has a couple of lines throughout the movie and she's terrible every time.
Every time. So, yeah, he goes to lunch and there's a girl there that he used to sit with and be friends with, and she sees him and just kind of like doesn't make eye contact and is real weird about it. Yeah. He has another friend that he like knew in middle school, but they're not really friends anymore. So he winds up having to sit by himself, and the whole thing is just really like painful to watch because he's just so alone and knows he's so alone, and is just trying to like get used to it. You know?
That's the thing, too, because I moved around so much, I didn't really experience, but I know from popular culture that it's a common theme where you can be friends with someone in elementary school and then they go through a metamorphosis of some kind, and then suddenly you're not friends anymore. Right. You know? Because I moved around so much, I never experienced it personally. But I understand it's a thing that happens to people. Is that something you dealt with where you were like, oh, we were friends in third grade, but now we're not cool anymore?
It was such a weird thing because, so she was my maid of honor at my wedding. So we became friends again, but we were friends in middle school because we lived really close to each other. And we both had like kind of flake new age moms. And we bonded hard over that kind of stuff. And then when we went to high school, I kept on with the like weirdo vibe a little bit more than she did. And she became friends with the more popular crowd that liked to like drink and party. And I was just not into that scene. But we were still like friendly. It wasn't like we never talked. It was just totally different crowd. She started dating one of like the jock guys, and she dated him for like 9 years. He was at my wedding also.
Yeah.
And then I told her, dump that asshole finally, and she did, because she was going to marry him, and I was like, what are you doing? But we still like are friendly, and she's going to be coming to my wedding, but it's not like it was, and it's the sort of thing that I don't know how strong our friendship ever really was.
Right.
We were just, you know, that's part of the thing is proximity also when you're that age.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things, and this is a real cliche for these type of movies, but again, sucker for it every time. You have the English teacher. Mm-hmm. And who is it in this movie? It's
fucking Paul Rudd.
Right. Big.
Yeah.
A lot of big names in this movie.
Yeah, there were. I kept being surprised, like, oh, okay.
Right. So, like, that was also, when I was a kid in high school, that was, like, the thing. Like, you have your English teacher who is like Robin Williams and fucking not Good with Hunting, but the other one. The Prince of Tides. Yeah. What's the movie?
Prince of Tides.
Not Prince of Tides. That's Nick Nolte. But you know what I'm talking about.
I know, the Dead Poet Society.
Yes. The teacher who
which I've never seen, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
You haven't seen that?
No, I have not.
It's not great.
Why would I watch that? I know exactly what it is.
But the teacher who stands on the desk and reads you the thing and gets you all excited, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, I feel like every person should have that. And even though this part of the movie was relatively small, I thought it was really important because when you're a Charlie, and I think, not to toot my own horn in a good or bad way, but I was definitely a Charlie. I was a fucking huge Charlie. I really was. It's bad and embarrassing. Having a teacher who makes you feel like some sort of connection is so huge and important. So I will always be here for these kind of movies that has that in it. Mm-hmm. So when he starts giving him books to read, you know, on his own, I'm all like, yep. I'm like, yep. I
had a teacher like that in 8th grade, but I got really mad at him because he tried to claim that trollop wasn't a word. And trollop? I was just like, how am I going to like respect you when you don't even know words and you're an English teacher? Like,
trollop is totally a word.
Yeah, no shit. And he was like, what? That's not a word. Like, yeah, don't get me started. So he winds up going to a football game and sitting next to the kid who was cutting up in shop class.
Right, Patrick. Or nothing.
Oh my God. I can't help, like, that intro of him, like, being the guy in front of the class when the teacher comes in. At first I was like, I don't know about this character. And then he sits down and the teacher's like, why don't you start us off with the reading? And he's like, how to deal with a fascist teacher. And he stops and looks around. Oh, this is actually very useful. We should read on. Right. I was like, all right, so you know what? You won.
And that was
you got me.
That was our friend, Ezra Miller, right?
It is. Indeed.
Yeah. He's all right.
Yeah, he is all right. And it turns out that Ezra, as I'm going to continue to call him, is having a gay affair with his middle school friend, who is now a football jock.
Yes.
And
how about that storyline?
This is like such a heartbreaker. Holy shit.
They are, at the beginning of the relationship, every time they get together, the jock, I forget his name,
Brad,
says every weekend, Brad sounds right. Mm-hmm. I was so drunk, I don't remember what happens.
Yeah, it's Brad.
But then he ends up helping him through his drinking, right?
Yeah.
And they stay together as a couple. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
A secret couple.
Still
and
secret.
At first, Ezra's like, I don't mind being secret as long as he's sober and he loves me even sober.
Mm-hmm.
But then comes the big thing where they get caught.
And that's a whole other story. Yeah.
And Brad comes in with his face beat up, telling people that he got mugged. Mm-hmm. And there's this horrific confrontation in the cafeteria. Yeah. It's really and it was really like the kind of moment where, like, so I'm going to back up a little bit and talk real quick about Charlie, because he's got a massive crush on Sam, who is Ezra's stepsister.
Who also, can we talk real quick about how she even has the fucking pixie haircut? Like, we didn't already get what she was supposed to be. They gave her the fucking pixie haircut.
Do you want to know what, though? As much as she does a little bit of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl thing, I kind of felt like Ezra was the Manic Pixie Dream guy.
He was.
More ways than she was. Like, almost like she was learning from him and was not innately that way. Does that make sense?
It does. He was absolutely more Manic Dream Girl than she was, but I just love that they gave her the haircut in case we got confused.
Yeah.
As viewers, we'd be like, oh, it's her.
Yeah. And, you know, he's really into her. I mean, she seems cool. She's not like, there are times where I feel like they have guys fall into these crushes with girls that I just am like, well, she's pretty and I don't get it otherwise. Like, that's all she brings to the table. And I at least saw the appeal with Sam. Mm-hmm. But there are two other friends of theirs.
Yeah.
Mary Elizabeth. And that was so I can't remember her other friend.
The blonde girl. Yeah.
Yeah, the one who steals jeans, even though she's rich.
Yeah.
And Mary Elizabeth, like, doesn't seem that interested in Charlie at all until he has to be brought in as the emergency guest star at their Rocky Horror Review.
Now that's
and she gets to see him in his underwear, and she's like, "Oh shit, wait."
I was a person who went to Rocky Horror at midnight on weekends. Mm-hmm. And that's another reason why I went and was like, when is this set? Because this is so specific, right? Like, so many things were like things I fucking did, songs I listened to, like whatever. And I don't think you have done that. I feel like
I have never seen Rocky Horror.
So, I don't know why and how, but Rocky Horror had a sort of resurgence in the 90s.
I remember.
And so I was one of those people that went like at midnight on a Friday night. Like, oh, we're going to go see Rocky Horror? Fuck yeah, we are. We're all going to go do it. And Steve also, even though he's a couple years older than me, that was a thing he did as well. And it's just such a touchstone. Like, I remember doing that. I remember showing up with all my friends. I remember, like, yelling to the screen and having people perform it. And now it feels kind of, like, dated and weird. Like, why would you do that?
You think? But, it feels kind of dated, she said.
But for some reason at the time, it was just like a thing to do on a Friday night.
This is another thing that I was like, yeah, so there goes the disconnect, because all of my older friends were super into Rocky Horror, and I had never seen it, and I did not get it. And I never was really interested in seeing it. So they would all quote it, and they would all dance to Time Warp when it came on, and there was this whole fucking... And I was just so not a part of it, and didn't really, like, want to be a part of it. Like, every bit that I saw of it when it was on at parties and stuff, I was like, this doesn't... I don't... Whatever. Okay, sure. I'm glad you like it. So the fact that this was, like, in this movie, it felt like another really distinct, like, oh, yeah, that crowd. Not my crowd, but that crowd that I was friends with. And Mary Elizabeth asks him to the Sadie Hawkins dance, which he agrees to go to, not realizing that in her mind this means that they are now a couple.
Right.
And
this is unfortunate.
It's a real ugly, like, part of the movie, but it's ugly in this sort of way that it's like, is it a cliched thing that we have this, like, oh, girls get so attached so quick and are so clingy and whatever? Yes, but did this also actually happen? also yes. Mm-hmm. So it's like one of those uncomfortable, like, oh, I really don't like that you're doing this, but also like, I have seen this with mine own eyes,
right.
you know? And I appreciated that she's not so hung up on him later. She, like, at first it's just like, no, you were an asshole, which he was. He deserved it. But then when they meet up again, she's dating somebody else and is totally like, I know this is hard for you, which was pretty great. But she's like calling him as soon as he gets home from school.
Yeah, he has nothing to say.
Yep. I don't, honestly, she's like, our relationship was pretty one-sided. And I was like, yeah, like, as much as I like Charlie, I don't get what you see in him.
Right.
I know what I see as a viewer because I get to read his journal entries and shit, like, but do you remember the friend that I told you about, that is part of our circle here that really, like, bugs the hell out of me, that isn't around all the time? I'm trying to, like, talk circles around this so that I don't use names and get too specific. But she is very much a Mary Elizabeth. Like,
oh, I know.
You know who I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah, I do.
And it's one of those awful things where Mary Elizabeth is not in and of herself a bad or annoying person, but she could easily, like, tip over into terrible territory. And that person that I'm talking about did that. She just went too far. And I do feel like most groups of friends kind of need a Mary Elizabeth to keep everything sort of grounded in a weird way.
The thing with Mary Elizabeth is they keep making a point of reminding us, too. Like, oh, she's a Buddhist, but she's still terrible. Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah, that was a weird, right? Yeah.
Right? Like, they kept trying to preface it so that every time she said something, we would be like, oh, but she's horrible, so we're not going to pay attention to her. Even though she had, like, really valid points.
Right, yeah.
And really good observations about who was shit and who wasn't. Mm-hmm. But they kept framing her like we were supposed to be like, oh, well, she's mean and she hates everybody, so we're not going to take her seriously.
Right. Yeah, so he finally goes to a party where they're doing Truth or Dare.
Oh, this was so hard to watch.
The dare is kiss the prettiest girl in the room.
And he does not kiss
and
his girlfriend.
And he fucking kisses Sam.
Yeah, he does.
Without even thinking about it.
Yeah. And
then everything explodes because apparently there's some history between Sam and Mary Elizabeth regarding guys that he doesn't know about.
And we don't really get.
No, and I really like that, to be honest, because that feels like such a true thing. When you're friends with somebody for that long, of course there's going to be like weird resentments and grudges about shit, that you would know nothing about because why would anybody talk about them to you?
Right.
So he temporarily is like exiled from the group and they are his only friends and he feels it.
Yeah.
There's 2 weeks and he's like typing on his little typewriter that was a Christmas gift from Sam, and he's saying it's getting bad again.
Yeah.
Which I really like that wording.
Yeah, because at the beginning of the movie they talk about his bad time, but we don't know what it means.
Mm-hmm. And this is all after, like, Christmas and New Year's, and his birthday's on Christmas. And this is when we start to get more pieces of the puzzle of what happened to him. Mm-hmm. Because he starts to have flashbacks about his aunt, who came, visited, and was going to give him his birthday present.
Now, this was confusing for me because his flashbacks, he's so much younger. Mm-hmm. And I had thought that whatever happened to him happened, like, more recently. But his flashbacks, he's like 8 or 9 or 10.
He's younger than that even, I think. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
So I think the flashbacks with his aunt are buried a lot more. And the reason that he was in the hospital recently was because of his friend. Mm-hmm. And we find out that she went to get a present and got hit by a truck.
Yeah.
And they come and the cops arrive at the house and tell her, his mother, what happened. And we see him at the top of the stairs, like, witnessing the news.
Right.
But we don't understand the full impact of the thing until later, which I will come back to.
Yeah, it's true.
So he's excluded from the friends group, and then we have the scene in the cafeteria.
This was hard to watch.
It's really hard. So Brad lets his friend trip Ezra, and Ezra at this point has pretty much had it. He's like tried to be understanding, but he can't take this secrecy and shame anymore. Mm-hmm. And he gets up in Brad's face and is like, "Are you going to fucking do something about that?" And he's like, "Why would I? I don't know what the fuck what are you talking about?"
Right.
And he starts to just walk away. And then Brad calls him a faggot, really purposefully, like...
Yeah.
And honestly, he said that, and I literally went, "Oh, shit."
Yeah.
Like, because I was just like, the audacity.
Like, how, though?
Right.
Like, how? How?
Because he got the shit beat out of him by his dad. Like, this is what y'all are doing to your kids.
How is it 2018? And I know this movie is set in the 90s, whatever, but like real life, like time out. I had a conversation today. Was it today? I think it was today. I was a friend posted something. I didn't even fucking click on it. But someone somewhere right now who is sort of famous is having a problem. And someone commented that the person who was starting the shit couldn't be trusted. And they used the T word.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? And I didn't know the details of the conversation. And I really didn't care. But I commented on my friend's post, "That word is ugly. It's hurtful. Don't fucking use it." Mm-hmm. And the guy came back to me, and he was like, "Well, I don't understand." And I just said real simple, "It's an ugly fucking word. Don't fucking use it."
Right.
And he came back, and he was like, and he said, "What should I say instead?" And I said, "Well, you could say transgendered, or you could say trans." And he was like, "Oh, but if I put the NY next to it, it's offensive." And yes. I was like, yeah.
Or you could say drag. Like, it depends on what the person's actually doing.
But and I was like, here's the thing. I'm not trans. I can't speak for the community, but I do know my friends that I care about have told me that it's an ugly word. It's a hurtful word. Don't fucking use it. Like, you can do what you want to do. You're a grown-ass man. But I'm telling you, this is what people think about it.
Right.
And I was thinking about how, like, because the person I was talking to, I'm pretty sure is black. I was like, not too long ago, like, language is a weird thing, and it evolves and it grows and it's always changing. Mm-hmm. You know, not too long ago, I would be colored, but you wouldn't call me colored to my face now. Right. Because shit has changed, and you understand and you recognize that that's hurtful and it's antiquated and it's just not appropriate for conversation right now. And it's not that hard to understand. So, like, why I was getting this pushback, I was like, is it important to you to say that word? Like, are you invested in it? Like,
people
don't
like to be
wrong.
You know, yeah.
Right. And it went back and forth, and then finally he was like, "Oh, I understand. It's fine. I get it." But to even have to, like, it's 2018. Like, how do you not know? And he used both that T word and transvestite. And I was like, dude, like, it's not 1991 anymore. Like,
yeah.
I'm on Facebook. I see you. You're on Facebook. You know better. Mm-hmm. So
there's a lot of stuff with language that I'm always just like, how are you that far behind? I remember when I was either middle or high school, and I had gotten really tan. And somebody said, "You look like a mulatto." And I remember just, like, literally being like, I learned that word from, like, Mark Twain. Who says that
Why are you still saying that?
Right? Like, yeah. Are you my grandma? Like, what are you doing? So, yeah, Brad says this, and Ezra turns around and decks him in the face and jumps on him and starts pounding his face in even more.
That was hard to watch them fighting like that.
It was. And then his friends, Brad's friends, jump up, grab Ezra off, and start holding his arms back while they just beat the hell out of him.
Yeah.
And you see Sam trying to run forward and interfere, and people are holding her back. And nobody has their eyes on Charlie, because Charlie is a non-entity again.
Exactly. Yep.
And you just see the camera, like, jumping from person to person and everything. And the camera jumps really quickly to Charlie's face and fades out. Sound kind of drops. And you see everybody on the floor. Mm-hmm. And Charlie's looking at his, like, broken, bruised, swollen hand.
Yeah.
Like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a super badass moment.
Yeah.
But later on, when Sam agrees to be friends with him and he's like, you aren't afraid of me? My heart broke because it never occurred to me that he'd think that. But of course he would think that.
Right.
And he says to these motherfuckers, touch my friends again and I'll blind you.
I know, it was so good.
Whoa! God damn! That is so fucking scary.
Yeah.
Why am I so attracted to, like, angry, violent men? He's not hot to me at all. And in that moment, I was like, Charlie, buddy.
Let's not get us started. And as someone who is, like, blacked out in a situation like that, where...
Oh, yeah, because you get in fights.
I do get in fights.
I wish I got in fights. I've never been in a fucking fight.
I don't mean to. And it's been a long time, though I've been itchy lately. But yeah.
If I come visit you in Philly, can we go get drunk at Oscars and pick a fight with somebody?
Listen, it won't even take us getting that drunk. I'm like so fucking aggro. No. I'm just ready to beat the shit out of anybody. I really am, you guys. You have no idea. I had so much rage.
Krista says you don't want it. It fucking hurts like a motherfucker the next day. If you get hit.
Well,
which,
also,
maybe I would, but I would fight dirty. I would bite. I would pull hair. I would go for groin. I would scratch. I would just like...
Your hands hurt from hitting people too, though.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Yeah. I think I told the story once before, but I was raised by a woman who, if I came home because people wanted to fight me and I didn't want to fight, I would get sent back outside to fight. That's how my mom was.
Mom.
She would send me back outside. And she also told me not to be ever afraid of picking up something to hit someone with. She told me that was fair. Yes.
I think that's, you know what? I like that policy, frankly.
Yeah.
If you're dumb enough to pick a fight with me in a fucking timber yard, you're going to get what you're going to get.
Exactly.
Like, you know what? If there's a 2x4 right there, maybe you should have picked that shit up first. Like, that's not on me.
That's your fault for planning that shit here. You should have waited till we were somewhere else. But yeah.
I'm just trying to think what's outside Oscars now.
All kinds of shit.
There's like so much trash in those streets all the time.
That's the best part
I'm just
of
picturing you. I'm picturing you being like smoking when this happens. So you get to use like your cigarette end to like burn somebody, you know? So yeah, this gets him admitted back into the friend group because he just like defended them so hard. And this and him like sort of blacking out here. There's another scene where he takes acid and just like wanders out into the yard and lays down in the snow. And his family is like, "What were you doing?" Because like a cop shows up because he went hypothermic.
He's trying to convince them. Yeah, I don't do drugs.
I would never do drugs.
I would never.
I was feeling feverish. I wanted to get some air. I felt faint, and that is all I remember, sir. So yeah, he gets admitted back into the group, but Ezra obviously is not the same.
Yeah.
He's trying to be the same.
But it's not.
And there's this really awful scene where they like go to a park and Ezra is saying, "Why can't we save people?" Because he's watching this guy that he's in love with deny who he is and get beat up for it. He's watching his stepsister date a garbage bag.
Oh my God, this guy is the fucking worst.
Oh my God, you guys.
Oh,
this fucking
this repeating question of, like, why do we fall in love with people who aren't for us? And the teacher says, what? We fall in love with what we think we deserve.
We accept the love we think we deserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fucking some true shit.
Yep.
It really is.
That fucking dude, first impression is, that's a really amazing photo. What kind of filter did you use? Oh, well, I did such and such, but, you know, it was complicated. The teacher gave me an A, but for all the wrong reasons. You know, they just don't get it.
I don't write poetry.
So I hear that you write...
me. I hated it so much.
When he said, well, I don't really write poetry, and I was like, if this motherfucker says poetry writes me, I will kill myself. And he fucking
what
said
happened?
it, and I was like... I couldn't, like, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean fucking anything.
It doesn't.
That's what.
It's the kind of thing a dude that's 22 will say to a 17-year-old because he thinks it means something. And
20-something guys dating high school kids are
wrong.
Straight up trash across the board, no exceptions.
Agreed.
Period. End of sentence.
Agreed.
That's all there is to it.
And
I don't
also,
want to hear anybody being like, well, you know, but he was really... No, shut up. He's trash.
And the fact that she's trying so hard to get into Penn fucking State, like, no shade, but little bit of shade.
I just can't, like... This is...
Chris said, well, shit.
I just, like, can't... This is something that if I could go back in time and slap and shake myself, even though I know it would do no good at all, I would still do it just for my own personal satisfaction.
You would still slap and shake yourself?
Because the guy I dated, he wasn't like, you know, way older than me. He was 2 years older than me. But he was absolute garbage. And I, like, knew it and was constantly catching him out in weird little lies or moments of him, like, saying that he knew what something meant when he didn't, or correcting me on shit that he was wrong about, or just being, like, really gross about other women, like, in front of me.
Ew.
And I put up with so much.
Ew.
And it's like, I don't know what it was that I was so infatuated with him. I don't know if it was just the straight up hormones of it, because we just fucked all the time, and if that was all it was. But he was one of the worst people I've ever known in my life. Like, looking back, he's a terrible human being, and his parents were racist, awful, horrible people who I realized, like, in retrospect, did not like me because I was Hispanic. And I never fucking put it together until, like, a month ago. I would think I texted you when I figured it out.
I think so, yeah.
Because his dad was constantly saying how afraid he was that I was going to marry his son and inherit the company. And they owned a paint store. And I was like, why is this guy so worried? And now I'm like, oh my God, the immigrants are coming and taking all the jobs. That's what he's talking. He's doing that, but like with his personal business.
Oh.
And because they were just, there was a lot of animosity towards me right out of the gate before they knew me. And most parents loved me because I was a polite, conscious person who was intelligent and who didn't drink or do drugs or make trouble of any kind, really, you know? So parents normally really liked me. So when his parents reacted that way to me, I was just like, what did I do? I don't understand why they feel this way. And would constantly say things about how they hoped he wouldn't end up with me. And I was like, I am such a, like, I'm so much better than he deserves. Why are you acting like this? And yeah, that's what it was. And I just didn't get it. But he tried to friend me on Facebook like 3 times. Or like, I just want to, like, I really want to message him and be like, what do you expect me to get out of this? Like, what are you thinking?
How does this end?
And it really, like, when he says, why can't we save people? It's like, that's one of the hardest things about living your life and having friends that you care about is that you watch people make bad decisions and you just have to let them, you know? Like, I had that very recently, as you know, with somebody that I really care about, just making a choice that I think is fundamentally a wrong choice that's going to hurt way more later. And tried to tell them my perspective on it and was very honest about it and took a risk in telling them, and they took it surprisingly well. But they went ahead and did what they wanted to do.
Because they will.
And because they will. And you can only, that's all you can do is if you want to be a friend. If they ask you or if you really feel like there's a potential danger, then you can tell them how you really feel. But a lot of the time, you just have to sit back and, like, let them just make mistakes. And they have to do the same for you.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So he is watching them graduate and trying to be happy for them.
Yeah.
But he's going to be alone now, and it's like really hard for him to wrap his mind about around what life is even going to be like in high school without them there. And before Sam winds up leaving for school, she finds out that this guy has been cheating on her the whole time, which of course he fucking has, because you're a high school student. He does not take you seriously as a relationship. And she's talking to Charlie about the fact that she picks the wrong people. And they start talking about their first kisses. And the first guy that she ever kissed was her dad's boss.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything gets really dark after this.
Yeah. And it's a kind of a weird lead-in, actually, when you think back, once we know what happened, because he then tells her about his aunt, who had something similar happen to her, and she turned her life around and became one of his favorite people until he met Sam.
Yeah.
Which, at this point, I think he believes, because he's pushed some stuff down.
Yeah. He has a different narrative for what happened until we get, like, the real sort of story later. You know, the way he frames his relationship with his aunt is so different than the reality that when it comes out, I texted you like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, and I just wrote back ellipses. Like,
it was so surprising to me. Like, oh my God, this thing with his aunt was something completely different than what we thought it was.
Yeah, so they start kissing because she's finally like, why didn't you just ask me out? And he says, I didn't think that was something that you wanted. Like, not for nothing, lady, but you were with somebody when he met you.
Yeah.
Like, why would he ask you out?
I was confused by that whole, why didn't you ask me out either? Because she was clearly in a relationship, you know.
Yeah.
Why would he? But, you know.
So they start kissing and she, like, strokes his leg. And he stops and, like, pulls back from her and kind of looks at her in this weird way. And she's like, what? And he says, no, nothing. And they keep kissing and she starts loading her stuff up later into the car. I don't think anything else happened between them. I think they just made out.
Yeah.
But he leaves and is clearly in this, like, I don't know what to call this. What do you call it? Like, the attack when you are triggered by something. What do you call that actual event?
I don't know. But that's what happened.
Yeah, so we see, like, the way it's filmed is actually pretty interesting because we see him and then we see a second him and then we see a third him all walking down the street towards his house, all taking off the tie, all, like, and he goes into the house and he's, like, rubbing at his face and, like, walking around and not knowing what to do. He stands at the front door and closes it and, like, bangs his head against the door.
Yeah.
And he's remembering the thing that Ezra whispered into his ear at one point about how I'm seeing Brad, but you can't tell anyone. It'll be our little secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was the same thing that his aunt whispered to him after she molested him.
Yeah.
And he calls his sister and is saying, did I kill our aunt? Could I? Because she was going to get a present for me, right? Yeah. So I basically killed her. And I mean, I know I didn't, but, like, I wanted her dead, kind of. So what then? And that adds, like, this whole other layer of it where he was a child. And he, like, goes up to her at one point. There's a flashback again of him seeing his aunt crying at the table. And he goes and, like, holds her hand and she turns her hand over and there's a scar from her attempting suicide on her wrist. So there's like so many layers of him like having empathy for her and what she's gone through, and like even as a child understanding that she's been through some shit, but then she did that shit to him.
And exactly.
So he's like decides that he's going to go pure empathy and bury entirely what she did to him. Like that doesn't count.
No, because she was in pain.
Her experience is the thing.
Right. Yeah, it really took a turn.
That shit is way too real. Like, this is something that recently came up for me, and I have always considered myself to be a pretty selfish person. And in many ways, I still think I'm a pretty selfish person because my instinct in a lot of ways is to be like, but what about me? But my therapist, I was talking about some things with various family members and people I know, and she was pointing out how every time I was like, I mean, they can be really such and such, which I mean, I understand because of their situation and this and that. And she was like, okay, you keep qualifying that somebody did something that upset you or hurt you. Like, you have to see their perspective as well. You don't have to. You can just be upset with them. And that is their responsibility. They chose to act a certain way.
Right.
And you can understand where they're coming from and not excuse them and not constantly tell yourself you're not allowed to feel this way. And so this whole thing with him, with just deciding that he's going to completely bury the abuse he suffered because what she went through was so traumatic that he has to completely put her first, just rang way too true.
Yeah, agreed. It's this thing where it's like, we want to be compassionate to whatever trauma the person's bringing to us, right? So we want to be compassionate to what they're bringing, but we cannot give ourselves that same compassion, you know? Yeah, it's a lot. So we want to understand Aunt Helen and be like, oh, well, she was so fucked up and who knows what happened to her and this and that. And we don't want to hold her responsible for the damage she has also done. And it's a weird place to be if you're someone who's experienced that or something similar to that. Like if you're listening and you know that someone in your life that loved you, and they really did love you, right? But they were fucked up because of whatever. The way their love manifested is in a way that did damage to you.
Yeah.
And you want to hold space to be like, well, they didn't mean to hurt me in that way. But they did. It's a thing that happened, right? It's really difficult to reconcile that, and it's hard fucking work, and sometimes it feels like it never...
Because it seems like it's in total conflict with itself.
It does. It absolutely does. You know? It's like when I was watching the movie at the beginning, and he talks about his Aunt Helen before we find out, like, the real deal, right? I immediately made a connection to someone in my own personal life. I'm like, oh, that was like my aunt. That's who did that for me. And then we get to this part, and I was like, oh, well, I don't have a thing for that. Like, I don't, that's not what my experience was. But, like, when I look at it, I think about the people in my life who were like Aunt Helen. And then I think about the people who were the other side of Aunt Helen. You know? And I want to have room for the positive ways that relationship impacted me, like music or whatever else. And it's really difficult to make space for, like, okay, this person was great and they gave me music or whatever, and then this other person, not so much, you know? And it's just like, it's a weird, messy thing. And that's what I mean when I say we have these movies that stylize it and make it easy to absorb because it all looks like nice and pretty and whatever. But when it's your real life, it's so much messier, you know? Like, I think about my own middle school and high school experience. I think about the people in my life, my aunts who music and all that stuff. But then there are other people, and it just, like, clouds it, and it makes it messy. And that's one of the things I liked about the way the story goes in the movie is that suddenly we're just in a hospital room with him. You know, like it just happens. Because that's what it feels like sometimes. Like, there's no good, there's no clear path. You know what I mean? Like, one moment it's this thing, and the next moment he's just in the hospital. And everybody's looking at him like he's crazy because something has happened. Yeah, the one thing that I've heard said that I really like recently about this kind of thing is you can have a reason without it being an excuse. Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to say it. And one thing I really liked about this movie, and I don't know if this is how it is in the book, but I'm going to assume it is that his family is really supportive and careful of him. Mm-hmm. You know, like he calls his sister and she immediately is like, call the cops and have them sent to my house. Like, there's no, oh God, what are you doing? His brother comes home from college and is like, hey, how are you feeling? Are you doing all right? Like this time of year? Like, there's not, oh God, get over it, dude. Jesus, he's such a fucking wacko. You know, like everybody is trying to be as supportive of him as they know how to be because they don't know what's going on. And he doesn't really know either yet, you know?
Yeah.
When he like wakes up in the hospital, he's literally like, where am I?
Yeah. I think that's the part I like the most is that his family is so eager to try to help him, but also like they're not 100% sure how to do that, you know, which I think is really real. When someone you love is struggling in that way, you want so desperately to help them, but you're also like, but what? Like, but what do I do? Yeah.
And that was something that he said about his friend shooting himself was I really wish he had left a note or something.
Yeah. Wow.
Which, like...
Fuck, yeah.
Do you know what?
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Mary.
Agreed. Would have been nice. What would have been super nice is if he just didn't do it in the first place.
Yeah, you know, that'd be extra super.
That would have been like my ideal. You know?
So he tells, because that's the first thing that he says to the doctor is, why is there so much pain? And she's like, well, what kind of pain are you feeling? And he's like, not me, not just me, everybody, all of it. I'm watching it everywhere. Why is it like this? Do you ever feel that way? And she just like looks at him and just, she's a fucking, you know, psychiatric doctor. Like, yeah, she fucking knows what you mean, dude. Yes. I can imagine she's seen worse than you. But he finally gets to the bottom of it and tells her what happened and winds up sharing it with his parents. Who the moment that she like explains to them. Yeah,
and they're just like, what the fuck? Like, we had no idea. Which is the other thing. Like, people generally have no idea that that's what's been happening to you. I mean...
I want to believe that, but sometimes I don't.
I really, honestly, like, it's... And I get what you mean, too, because you feel like on some level you had to be like, right? Mm-hmm. But generally the reaction is so like, oh my God, I had no idea. That you kind of have to accept that. Like, maybe they didn't. Maybe they really just couldn't bring themselves to think that way. Think that that's what was happening. Because who wants to think that?
Yeah.
You know? Nobody wants to.
Do you hear this?
What?
It's hailing.
Are you getting a tornado? I saw your fucking weather watch thing.
Yeah, I sent her a screenshot where it was like tornado watch in your area. Do you hear that thunder?
Mm-mm.
Wow. This came out pretty suddenly, but yeah, it's definitely hailing. I hope that I don't lose power and we like lose this whole thing. Fingers crossed.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah. So he goes through like the whole process of therapy, his parents getting notified of what happened to him, and like meeting up with them and then finally being released. And I can't help but think about like him returning to school after this episode.
Yeah.
And if people are going to hear about it again, like, just sucks, you know? But he's getting letters from Sam, like she's writing to him, which is such a old-fashioned thing, but it's great. I love getting snail mail. And then on their break, they show up at his door. It's Ezra and Sam. And it's just a nice little capper that they've moved away, but they still consider him a friend, and he's going to be eventually moving on to join them in whatever way. You know?
He just has to get through high school, which, and this is the other thing I love about these type of movies, where it feels like high school is insurmountable. Like it just never, it's never going to end. How am I going to get to the other side of this? You know, because high school can be like that.
He's literally counting the days. Krista says, old-fashioned, you're killing it. Yeah, old-fashioned. Krista, when you were in college, did you write letters to your friends? No, you emailed them. You called them. You'd show up. You wouldn't write letters to them. Yes, I did write letters. Girl, I don't believe you. Flat out, straight up saying it. I don't believe you.
No, Krista
that you
was
wrote
already
your friends'
like
letters.
The AOL and all that other stuff.
Some didn't have computers. Then you call them. I said call. I said that shit. But yeah, I mean, I just was pleasantly surprised that even though everybody in the school was often a huge dick to him and that he was bullied and whatnot, that his family was as cool and supportive as they were. He sees his sister like get smacked by her boyfriend.
Oh God, how about that? And she pushes
which
him
is
out
a
of the
weird little
room.
subplot. Yeah.
Yeah, she ends up breaking up with him, but we don't really get any of that information. Like, we know she breaks up with him because when she goes to the prom, she goes with her friends. She goes stag, which is how I went to my prom. I went with my girlfriend.
Me too.
So
my friend Lace, who is going to be a bridesmaid, whom you shall meet soon, who works in a fashion house in New York, making like 6 figures now. Who are you, Lace? How are we still friends? But yeah. I was glad to see that at least, like, as much as the movie's like, why can't we save people? They are very clear on sometimes people learn. Sometimes they make good decisions and move on, you know? Like, high school is no way to judge somebody's judgment.
It really
isn't. That's a weird
sentence, and that's
but...
the thing about high school, too, is it feels so important. When you're having it, when you're in the middle of it, it feels like it is every fucking thing. Because you're a teenager and you don't know any better. It feels like it has telling you everything about your life. Yeah. But it's fucking high school. It's a blip. It means nothing, guys. It means nothing.
Which is sometimes a shame to people like me who had an excellent high school experience in many ways. As
and
much
then,
as
like,
my
you think
boyfriend
your whole
was
life's
trash.
going to be excellent, but then it's not.
It is not excellent. Surprise, surprise. People don't give you prizes for just doing your job.
Yeah.
Like, not often, anyway. Not unless you're a white dude at a Fortune 500 company and get your Rolex for your 10-year anniversary or what the fuck ever. But, so yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I didn't know what to expect going into it, you know, like.
I enjoyed it tremendously. I fucking loved the soundtrack. I loved the sad boy who's like super smart, but no one knows it. Like all those fucking stupid tropes. Like, you know, I'm a sucker for every time.
You said you're going to read the book?
Oh, yeah, I probably will. Like, if I'm probably find it and read it, because it just is up my alley. There's all kinds of Smith music, which I'm a big fan of. You know, yeah, it's all...
In some ways, this reminded me a little bit of Eleanor and Park, which I covered for the book club earlier this year. And it's a high school angst story as well, about some outcasts. But there were some problems with it, don't get me wrong. And it's a lot more triggery in some ways because she's dealing with abuse at home domestic abuse, and poverty. And so in that way, parts of it, I was just like, I can't read this. This is a lot. And I had to take breaks. But music is a huge factor in that. And like sharing of things that are important to you and touchstones like that.
Right.
And so I saw that this book got nominated for the book club for this coming year, but it had been nominated after somebody had commissioned it. So I was kind of like, guys, there's no real point in me having this as a book club book when I've read it already.
Right.
But maybe I'll read it. Maybe I'll give it a shot. I'd be interested. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention on this? I'm feeling like we're forgetting something.
I really enjoyed it. I fucking, the music, the idea of like the sad boy, super smart, that doesn't fit in until people come in and tell him he's okay. Like all that shit really just, got me in the feels. And I was like, yeah, I get that. I get that. And I get that too. So I'm glad that someone asked us to watch this, because I don't know if I would have watched it otherwise,
Agreed. Oh, you know what I forgot? The part at the park where Ezra kisses Charlie.
Oh, right.
And then is immediately like, I'm sorry. And Charlie doesn't freak out or just be like, he's just like, it's okay. And just like hugs him.
Charlie doesn't freak out hardly at all.
Not even a little bit. He catches them kissing and is just like, oh, sorry, the way you would with anybody if you walked in on them, you know?
Yeah, he's super chill through the whole thing. Like, no matter what people throw at him. Which is interesting behavior for someone who has been through what he's been through. You think he would be kind of a little bit more high-strung. But he's
when he walks in on
them,
he's high as fuck. So that could account for his being that chill at that moment.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, that's fair.
Are you baked? Like a cake.
Like a cake.
But yeah, later on when they're in the park, he just really understands where Ezra's coming from, kissing him like that. Like, there's no misunderstanding or anything about it. He's just like, dude, all right, it's fine. Come here, buddy. It's like, oh, you know how to be a good friend. Yay.
He is the best friend, right?
He is, yep. Except for, kissing another girl.
Oh, my God, that moment. What was he thinking? Kiss the prettiest girl and you don't kiss your girlfriend.
I love Sam just standing up and just being like, what is wrong with you? Because that's the question.
Jesus Christ.
Buddy. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming to this crowdcast. Thank you to Anonymous for commissioning this and finding the loophole.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you for suggesting it.
I always like when I can pay RoShawn for hosting with me.
Oh, that's right. I'll get a check in the mail. Yay.
Yeah. So this was really fun, and I'm just so thankful that all of the people who have commissioned stuff have such excellent taste.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you for not sucking and liking terrible stuff. And all right. I guess we'll sign off. We love you all. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye, guys.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.